All right, good morning and good afternoon for all of you who has joined us today. Thank you for joining. My name is Christine Hullim and I'm the Events and Membership Coordinator at Connecting Up. And with me I have Melita, who is the intern here, and she'll be, this is one of her first experience of facilitating the webinar, so please make her feel welcome. Before I pass it on to Scott Jones from IT Leaders, who will present the webinar to you today, just a few housekeeping notes for those of you who are new to webinars. We have muted all of you because we will be taking questions only via the question or chat box. So if you have any questions along the way, please type them in that box, and Melita and I will facilitate and moderate those questions at the end of the presentation. Other than that, we will send you the slides as well as the link to the recording of the session afterwards, so you will get a copy of everything. Okay, well, in that case, I will pass it on to Scott. Scott, you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
You're very clear, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Christine, and thanks everyone for your time and for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, times are changing. Now, you'd all be aware of the creation of the ACNC and moves that are underway at the moment to bring director liability to the not-for-profit space. There's never been a better time to step back from your organisation and survey the landscape and have a look at the things that are going on. There's a lot more that's changing around us than just this. Today's presentation, I've got a bit of a challenge on my hands today. What I'm going to tell you is that, give you some strategies really that a not-for-profit can use to modify their business model. There are only small changes really in essence. They don't involve changing a lot about the way you deliver services to your clients, but it's really about leveraging technology and global sourcing strategies to lower your risk, more easily comply with regulations, ultimately become much more effective at delivering your goals. At the same time, while doing that, I also propose that you can achieve a massive 20% reduction in your operating costs and also cover the cost of an optional simultaneous expansion into another country. So by the end of this presentation, you're going to know how to make your organisation more efficient at what it already does, reduce your risk, reduce your costs by 20%, and fund the start of an international expansion. So how's that for the scope of a 45-minute presentation? It's quite honestly, there's a lot packed in there, and some of it may end up sort of being a little bit of a blur, but a lot to try and get through to explain the whole concept. So we're just going to put questions at the end, and I encourage you to just make notes as you go on the things that you'd like me to expand a bit on at the end. I'm more than happy to chat offline to anyone after the webinar and fill in the details on some of the things that we have to skip over fairly quickly today. And I'll also make available a copy of the slides via Christine so that you can hopefully jog your memory as to some of the things we've discussed today. So, who am I to be making those outlandish claims? I'm a serial entrepreneur who's been managing businesses for 15 years and creating my own businesses for over 10. I've built 4 successful businesses from scratch, and I've got a knack for spotting big trends in their early stages. A couple of examples. In 2005, I noticed an overseas trend in the way that IT services were being delivered to the small and medium enterprises. And I changed my IT company's business model and its processes and invested in cutting-edge fault monitoring and management systems. Within 5 years, all the top IT firms in Australia were using those tools, and most of them, however, without the necessary changes to their business model that ensured the best result to the client. Another example, in 2008, I spotted another trend, that more companies were starting to use centralized servers hosted in data centers, and the servers were owned by third-party companies. I created a new division in my IT firm and invested in building a server farm, and that's kind of just like a big room full of server power that other people can rent. By the end of 2009, we'd already spent 9 months building and testing our own private cloud computing products. That was right when the word cloud was just starting to become a buzzword. We already had put our first not-for-profit customer onto a private cloud before most customers had even heard of the phrase. And they marked over 3 years of being part of that private cloud just a couple of months ago. Today, most IT companies resell someone else's cloud services because they were just too slow to adapt to the changes. In 2009, I began building an offshore team to complement our Australian team. Why did I do that? Well, it was my insistence upon quality, the quality of the result that we wanted to deliver to our customers, that meant that we had real pressure on our margins in the IT services business. The advanced technology we were using was fantastic, but we were finding it was actually really expensive to do everything properly. Now, many of our competition were relying on the fact that customers typically can't tell how well their systems were being maintained, nor could they tell if an issue could have been prevented if someone had actually been configuring and monitoring the systems properly. So really, they just didn't bother doing the things that the customers couldn't see. So if I wanted to do everything to a really high standard, either my prices were uncompetitive or else our margins were too thin to be safe. So I had to choose to either lower my standards, which wasn't an option, or find a lower cost way to deliver the service quality that I wanted to deliver. So I set up an office in Manila, hired some top quality staff and trained them to do a lot of the back end work that was really important but too expensive to do in Australia. Over time, we've hired and trained offshore staff to do all sorts of things now. Lower level technical work, senior technical work, administration, bookkeeping, financial reporting, customer service, sales support, even lower level management positions. The Australian team now does only the really high value, the face-to-face, the most complex work, and the customer management work. None of our clients even noticed we had an offshore team until we told them a couple of years later. They just noticed that the service levels went up. So over the last 18 months, I've helped various organisations do that same process and utilise this new business model. And it started to dawn on me that the very nature of business is changing as a result of globalisation. We tend to think of globalisation as something that impacts the manufacturing sector, and many big businesses have moved their internal call centres to other countries, banks and telcos, that sort of thing. And if you just think about it in that light, the impacts don't seem like something to worry about for businesses like those that you and I operate. But what I came to realise is that the biggest new consumers of offshore talent is now the SME sector, and the small and medium enterprise sector is by far Australia's largest employer. So we haven't even begun to see the huge impact that this new business model is going to have on Australian employment. The sheer volume of low-cost, high-skilled workers in countries like the Philippines and India is just astronomical, and I watched dozens of business owners start the process of changing their business models to source talent globally. It's actually happening so quickly that I project in as little as 5 years, this is the only business model that's going to be competitive. I also saw quite a few directors do this process poorly too, making mistakes that I felt were quite avoidable. So after helping a few friends successfully set up offshore, I ended up setting up a consultancy, formalised the process, and then it's now helping others go through the process of changing their businesses to have a global sourcing model. And that consultancy is called Easy Offshore. I personally found that almost every white-collar job I tried to place offshore, every office-based position if you like, could be done just as well there as in Australia, but at around a quarter of the cost. So it got me thinking, where's it all going to go? If I can have 50% of my team offshore, then surely most other businesses could do that, and eventually they will do that. What's that impact on employment going to be? How's that going to change the nature of business in this country? So I started wondering what the federal government thought about the future impact of this situation. The more I hunted for government information, the more I realised that they don't have any idea. They have no way to track the volume of jobs going offshore. They have no strategy to deal with it. They don't really even understand the extent to which it's happening, and they've got no way to stop it. So I decided to write a book on the topic in the hope that every Australian would become aware of the unfolding issue, and together we could all come up with some solutions. And that book was released just yesterday, actually. It's called The Third Wave, Micro-globalism and the Coming Employment Crisis in Australia. Its first 2 chapters are available for free download on my blog, which is www.scottlyndonjones.com.au. That link will be up at the end of the slides. Now, this book doesn't advocate trying to stop what's already in motion in regards to offshoring. The more I thought about it, the more I don't think it's even possible to stop it. And I definitely believe there'll be a lot of businesses in the future that will stick their heads in the sand and then find that they can't compete and they go out of business. Or otherwise they may have unprofitable businesses that are then acquired at a discount by other businesses who have successfully adapted. So the book aims to create a level playing field so that we all understand the changes that are happening and we can all choose how we're going to adapt to it. So in summary, I'm a trend spotter, an early adopter, a technology advisor, a global resourcing consultant, an author, and generally someone that looks for a better answer. So I'm going to throw some ideas at you now for how I see the not-for-profit sector evolving over the next 5 years. The Futures Forum in 2011 released some really good not-for-profit benchmarking. Their report said that the cost and quality of a not-for-profit's administrative and support services directly affects its capacity to deliver critical services to people in need. Organisations that deliver their administrative and support services efficiently can spend a greater proportion of their budget on front-of-house services delivery. Similarly, high-quality administrative and support services free up staff to spend more time helping their clients. Now, that's a fairly obvious but important observation, and this report looked at 5 back-of-house cost centres. They were HR, payroll, fleet, finance, and ICT. Now, it's a very interesting report, and it's well worth rereading after thinking about the information presented today, as every single one of those areas will have cost reductions if following the strategies I've presented. In essence, you can be a leader in every single one of those benchmark areas just by making a couple of relatively simple changes. So I'm just going to quote a couple of excerpts from the book, because I really want to give you an idea of the way that the nature of business is changing, and then I'm going to show you really how it relates to the not-for-profit sector. Because ultimately, you know, we're all running businesses, whether they're for-profit or not. There needs to be a viable business entity. So a couple of quotes. This section discusses the new business model that I see emerging. Another business I know very well is a decades-old services business with over 200 staff. This business very nearly folded during the GFC. I can't provide many specific details that will identify the business owner who declined to be named. The company has since been reborn with a much lower overhead model due to offshoring many of its office-based roles. Those changes saved the company from collapse and saved the majority of Australian jobs. The most interesting thing about that story, however, is not that cheap labour saved the business or that offshoring saved some Australian jobs as well. It's actually that the quality of the business improved as a result of changing its model. First, they sent some administration jobs to a hub in Manila. They hired some staff directly in Manila. Sending just 9 roles offshore saved them nearly $500,000 per year. 9 roles, $500,000. Now that alone was enough to save the company from collapse, which is great. As profits improved steadily over a 12-month period, additional offshore staff were employed to research and test new marketing strategies. So because of the low-cost labour, they realised they could test theories and experiment dynamically in ways that they couldn't have afforded to do in Australia. This proved so effective that their marketing systems were adapted around the new research, and the entire marketing division was subsequently shifted to Manila, with just the highly skilled existing marketing manager being retained. And she actually moved to Manila with her family as well. Then this business also began to experiment with training critical telephone sales staff in Manila. This was done with some significant trepidation, as customer bookings by phone represent 95% of their sales, and the business owner did not know if their Australian clients would react negatively to the American Filipino-style accents of the sales staff. It took some time to perfect, but now this business has around half of its call centre staff in Australia and half in Manila. Their Manila staff not only cost a fraction of the price, but, more importantly, are actually now better at inbound sales than their Australian counterparts, who have years more training and the cultural and language advantages. Interestingly also, the Manila staff's hang-up rate for customers who are allergic to their accents is less than 1 in 1,000, proving that customers care more about good service than they do about accents. Here's one more short quote. This is a really interesting business that I know quite well. If you aren't yet convinced that micro-globalism is changing the basic way we do business, here is one more example that might stretch your thinking. Let us consider this small training organisation based in Brisbane. If you arrive at the office unannounced, you will be directed into a small welcome office. There you will talk to a polite and well-dressed man. He has a slight American accent, but it's easy to understand. He's friendly and efficient and is keen to help you with your inquiry. It's a low-cost office with little that stands out. It has a few basic office desks and chairs, 2 filing cabinets, a printer and a scanner, and a bookshelf that's floor-to-ceiling full of complicated-looking government legislation documents. In fact, the only unusual thing about this office is that you're the only person in there. The man you've been speaking to is visible on a video screen on the wall, beamed live from Manila. He says he can help you with the module you're interested in studying and gives you information on when the next course will be scheduled. When you're ready to proceed with payment, he'll ask you to fill out a very brief form and place your credit card and the form on the scanner in front of you. He will then scan the information, ask you to take a complimentary study pack from the desk in front of you, and let you know that everything else you need will be sent to you by mail or courier the following day. The whole process is fast and efficient. This is happening every day. I know this training organisation quite well. Your credit card will be processed by the team in Manila. The information on your form will be used to personalise your study guide and prepare the lengthy government forms relating to your course qualification. All of this will be transmitted to a printer in Brisbane, which prints and automatically staples the document before an Australian staff member checks the finished copy and puts it into an envelope. The Brisbane courier to deliver the documents to you will be ordered from Manila. Contacting each student and ensuring they are fully prepared to undertake their training unit will happen from Manila. Organising the course and ensuring there are Australian trainers and rooms booked will happen from Manila. Initial bookkeeping and processing and sending invoices will all happen from Manila. Until 3 years ago, this was a typical Queensland training organisation in every sense. The directors had no concept of offshoring. Today it's a business that from outside still looks like any other training organisation, unless you happen to arrive at the door unannounced. Other than that, you'll have no idea that inside it's a working model of micro-globalism that is efficient, successful, and has satisfied and very well trained customers. The above example illustrates a very important point in relation to understanding that micro-globalism is not something that is coming, but rather something that has already arrived. You absolutely have already used many businesses that utilise offshoring. They're just doing it quietly and you haven't noticed. You have been pleased with the service of some of these businesses and you have recommended them to your friends. But unless a business had frontline roles offshore, in most cases you have no way of knowing where the work is being done. End of the quote. So I've given you 2 examples there from the book of very different sized businesses. One's a large company, the other is a small business, and there are plenty in the middle making the same changes to their business models. So bringing it back to your not-for-profit, you might be wondering what roles could you potentially source offshore. A lot of business owners, when they start having a chat to me about this, they really feel that everything they do needs to be done locally. I can tell you from experience in my own businesses and from watching now, 50 other businesses go through this process, that almost anything that doesn't require a physical presence or detailed local knowledge could potentially be done offshore. The chances are that half the jobs in your organisation could be done just as effectively for a fraction of the price by setting up an offshore team. Now, what I've personally done in some of my businesses, as I mentioned, is to have really the expensive people doing the expensive work and to have the inexpensive people giving them all the support possible in order that the team provides brilliant service to our clients. Any services delivery is a team effort, as you know more than anyone. And up to a point, making more skilled people available to do the work can give you a better end result. Now, offshoring is a way either to add more hands to improve service levels, or to reduce costs, or a bit of both. In my case, I knew what quality I wanted to deliver and what service levels I wanted to produce, so I added more people to solve the issues that I had. So the Future Forum's benchmarking was an interesting way to compare your organisations against what has been considered normal up to this point. However, what I'm here to tell you today is that normal has now been turned on its head, and the Future Forum's benchmarking is almost useless to you. How do you think your current administration costs would stack up against another not-for-profit who is doing 50% of their admin roles in India? What about the not-for-profit that runs a call centre in Manila? Now, you may have some of your staff as volunteers or on low wages by Australian standards, but you'll never beat the cost efficiency of a well-trained, highly motivated admin team in one of these Asian global hubs. So it makes me wonder, how attractive will your request for funding be when another services provider can deliver, say, 20% more results for the same price, or else quote 20% cheaper rate for the same results? Now, clearly not everything's about price, but that's a big difference. In the for-profit business world, these changes are going to turn into a race for survival at the exact time when those who have adopted the new model decide to drop their prices below the cost prices of those who haven't adopted the model. And at a time when governments are looking to get ever more value from their expenditure, why wouldn't that happen in the not-for-profit sector too? So best practice, what does that mean now in light of this? Well, the concept's still the same, and broadly speaking, you could say that it means to do things like treat all your staff exceptionally well, fulfill all your compliance obligations, minimize your director risk, and deliver the best possible services as cost efficiently as possible to your clients. So if there becomes available a much more efficient way to deliver services, wouldn't it be best practice to adopt it? Now, I've worked with the not-for-profit sector long enough to know that it's definitely not all about the dollars. Indeed, discussions like this make some not-for-profit executives downright uncomfortable because the idea of hiring people in another country instead of Australia clashes with their spirit of community dedication. I understand that. But what we're really dealing with here is the question of how effective we can be at the mission. If there was a way to be 20% more effective, that's a big number and a big reason to give it some consideration, maybe some experimentation. The typical saving, for example, for one administrative offshore position is around $50,000 per year, $50,000 per year per position. And that's after factoring in overheads. Assuming that your staff may be working for less than average commercial wages, say, let's reduce that and call it a $40,000 saving per average position. And that can be achieved at any scale. This isn't a big business concept anymore. And that's why it's a game changer. It's not about banks and telcos doing this anymore. It's about every single business of every single size is engaging in this new model. One single position can achieve that saving. And in a small business, saving $40,000 a year is a big deal. With more than 30 positions, the savings go up further. With higher skilled positions, if you're looking to get some, not just say standard administrative type roles, but if you're looking for some really highly skilled jobs, the savings are actually quite higher again. Example, I've got an MBA trained financial and administrative officer that used to work for Toyota. She has an MBA. Very good at what she does. She cost me, actually she was one of my very first staff members in Manila. She cost me $17,000 per year, Australian, and she is as good as anyone I previously had in that role in Australia at 4 times the price. I'm actually paying above market rates too, so she doesn't get tempted to go job shopping with the many thousands of other Australian and US employers hiring staff in Manila. With her secure and well-paid job, she recently purchased her first house, just start of December. Super excited about it. It's very cool. She sent me some pictures today, actually. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. But she's planning on paying that house off within 5 years. 5 years. I wish I could pay off a house in 5 years. $17,000 per year doesn't sound like much to you, but it's actually a very, very good salary for a very good team member. One client we're working with, who I'll tell you a little bit more about later, they've got just 15 staff. They're not a big business, medium size, and the business is projecting to save around about $700,000 over 3 years just by adding their next 5 roles offshore. They're not changing their existing team at all. They're just hiring the next 5 roles offshore. They've told their Australian team what they're doing. The team's really excited about the possibility of offloading their least favourite tasks to skilled team members offshore so they can do more of the stuff that they love and that they're really good at, and that brings a lot of value to the organisation. So, look, it's not really about completely changing the way you do business. There's no real changes to the way you're delivering services. It's just simply a matter of making existing elements of your business work for you a little bit differently, and that has the effect of helping you reach your goals sooner. Let's leave that for a moment and look at technology. Let's assume for a moment that your organisation was interested in the concept of offshoring. Probably your next questions are going to be around picturing how people in another country could work efficiently for your organisation. You know, how do they connect into your organisation's information and work with your applications? How do they talk with and interact, collaborate with your other staff here in Australia? And that's where technology becomes a vital part of the new emerging business model. And indeed, technology has been an enabler for this business model, and that's why it's only happening now, is because the technology has evolved to the point that has enabled this to be possible and affordable. Again, it's not just about a big business, it's not a big business concept anymore. The technology has become affordable to the SME sector. There's two main technologies that best enable that global sourcing business model. The communication tools, that's really your telephones. How are you going to talk to each other around the world? How do people around the world talk to your clients or your other staff? And sharing information and applications. So all the stuff that you tap away at on your computer each day, how does that become available, secure, and scalable for teams if you run them in other countries? So the first technology to check is the phone system. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. I hope the diagrams make the concept simple, but I'm happy to run through this in any sort of level of detail later on. Many of you will already have phone systems that do this. If you're running satellite offices or offices in other states at the moment or other countries, your phone system probably has these capabilities already. And even if you don't have other offices, your phone system may already have these capabilities, it just hasn't been turned on. So the phone system must be capable of having remote staff work as though they're sitting in your head office. Now many of you, as I said, already know that. You've probably got phone systems that do it. I'll show you this diagram just to explain it so that we all understand where it's at. Now this type of technology used to be $100,000 to buy a phone system that does this. Now they start at about $10,000. So you can finance them from something like $10 a day. You know, obviously it scales up depending on the size of the organisation, but the point is that this isn't expensive technology anymore. So the green part on that chart shows what telephone devices can be used and connected into the phone system. So you've got desk phones, you've got headsets that attach to PCs, so you don't actually have a physical phone on your desk, you can just use a headset. And you can hook mobiles into the phone system as well. So for example, a call can be forwarded out to you on your mobile while you're out at the office. Fairly standard stuff. You probably have it already. The phone system's the blue square in the middle, and you can see there with the blue arrows on the left, you've got incoming and outgoing calls. They may be going out over standard telephone lines, ISDN lines, cellular dialers, anything really, cheap VoIP calls, almost anything. So it's important that phone system's flexible in the way that it can make those calls in and out, and cheap. You need cheap calls. Then the yellow section down the bottom shows how all your staff connect in as though they're sitting in the same office. So you really you want all your staff to just have a standard extension, the same way that you in your office have an extension number for your phone and the person in the next office has one. The person in the next country can have an extension like that. And from the perspective of your staff, they can just dial an extension and it will be connected anywhere in the world, wherever that person is. From the perspective of people trying to dial into your organisation, it can work the same way. So on the right-hand side of that diagram, you've got your head office team there. And at the moment, they probably plug directly by cable into your phone system. They may actually plug into the wall, but then behind the wall, there's a cable that snakes its way back to your phone system. Then on the left-hand side, you've got your satellite office, and that can be in Australia or offshore. The principle's the same, really doesn't matter where they are. And that utilises the internet to connect your external extensions, your people sitting at their desks in other places, through the internet into your phone system. And that connection from them into the phone system is free. That's a really important part of this concept. It wouldn't work if you were having to pay international rates for every single call that was placed to your team in India or Philippines or something like that. So there's some basic principles there, which, as I said, are not expensive, but that's the way that you can enable the voice side of having a global operation to all work efficiently. With those phone systems, you generally always get the standard sorts of features like voicemail, automatic menus, ring groups, that sort of thing. So you can have a call or multiple calls coming in that might overflow to your team in Manila, or they might ring phones simultaneously in multiple different offices so the next available person can pick up the call. You can really route calls however you want to do it. So the next thing to think about is the way that the information sharing and application sharing is going to work. So you might have applications installed on your computer at the moment. You might have servers in your office where you've got applications installed. The important thing is that wherever your staff operate, in whatever country or state, anywhere in Australia or the world, they need to be able to access the same tools that you can access, and you need to be able to tightly control what people can access. The same way you would with your team at the moment. You'll have information sets and applications that only your management team can access, for example. It's the same concept. So the best way to do that is via what's called a private cloud. And we'll quickly just walk around the numbers that are on this chart in front of you. I'm not sure if you can read that on your screen, but I'll read out the important bits for you. So point number 1 in the top left-hand corner, you've got this thing called a private cloud desktop. And most of your staff will work via this cloud desktop. And it looks and feels like just a normal Windows computer desktop, so there's no staff retraining required. It's all very familiar looking. The devices you use to connect into this cloud desktop, that could be a PC, an iPad, a Mac. The device doesn't really matter anymore. But what it'll have is one single window showing the cloud desktop, and all of your work, all of your work happens inside that window. So you can change to a different device or location. You can close your laptop at work. You can go home, start up your PC or your Mac at home, and log onto the cloud desktop, and there's all your documents and applications, your email, everything open just as you left it at work, exactly the same. So if you like, those devices are just a window into what's happening on your private cloud server. The physical device that you're using in front of you really doesn't matter anymore. That's an important point, because you don't really need to buy expensive computers. You can buy the cheapest computer, or you can have old computers that run for 10 years, and it doesn't slow down the productivity of your staff when using this private cloud concept. Skipping across to the right, where point number three is your office location. So you've got all your team members using a private cloud desktop and all the different devices. Your office locations can be anywhere. They're all connected into your private cloud. You can have offices anywhere in the world. Staff can also work from any location in the world which has reasonable internet speeds, including 3G, your telephone wireless type devices. So really, you could take your laptop from the office, you can go home or go to the top of a mountain or the beach or anywhere where you've got 3G access, connect into your private cloud and keep working. That's great from a disaster recovery point of view as well, because it means that if your office burns down, your staff can work effectively from anywhere, to the extent that their work is computer-based anyway. So then all of your offices and your people that are out on the run and your teams in other countries connect via the internet into point number 4 on that chart, which is your private cloud. And essentially, as I said, it's just a whole bunch of servers running in data centers. Won't go into the boring technical stuff, but it's just a heck of a lot of computing power that's available for your organization to turn up or down as you need to. We're quickly getting to the point where organizations won't spend money on buying infrastructure, IT infrastructure anymore. It's only organizations like mine that will actually buy the infrastructure, and everyone else just basically rents it, as much or as little server and computing power as you want that's available on dollars per month basis. Point 5, you can have any applications that you want. All your existing applications and databases can be hosted in your private cloud as well. That's important because it's an important distinction there from the public cloud with their offerings like Google Apps and Microsoft's Office 365. They're great products. They're not hosted in Australia, which is a bit of an issue for not-for-profits, but they're great products, but they're not flexible. If you want to install MYOB somewhere or whatever financial application you're using, or a particular CRM, client management type tool, there's nowhere to install that. So with those sorts of public cloud offerings, you end up having to install them on your PCs or run servers in your office anyway. So public cloud stuff's kind of a tiny slice of the broader IT solution that a not-for-profit organization needs. in that regard, they're ultra cheap. You can't get any cheaper than a public cloud, Google Docs or something like that, but it's only part of the answer. So, so the headline price really isn't what you're going to end up spending. Point number 6, backup and disaster recovery. Whenever you go with a private cloud solution, you get a default backup system and disaster recovery approach. So rather than you having to manage and be confident that the backups are running properly on your equipment in your office, that's really our responsibility to manage on a written agreement. The difference with one of the differences with the way we do it is that it's a very flexible backup approach, and we recognise from talking to our clients that they want to be able to manage their risks differently. And some clients are happy to abdicate responsibility. They just want us to look after it, and they don't want to know about it. It's just one less hassle for them, and that's fine. Other clients are very specific and very, almost paranoid about the way that their data is handled, and they see a substantial risk in giving that responsibility to another organisation. So what they do is they choose a different type of backup. So we'll still run our standard default backups, but we can do things like back up their entire servers to a data center of their choosing, or we can back it all up to their office on a secure server in their office, or we can do archives to tape that gets sent out to them once a quarter with their entire server information all contained within that. So essentially, whatever you can dream up, however you want it to work, we can make it happen. That's a source of comfort for some people, and quite often people like to know that they can change that at any stage, even if initially they don't want those sort of facilities. And then we've got location and security, point 7. Importantly, all our private cloud stored in Australia, which is essential for many not-for-profits. They actually have, not all of them, but a lot of them have a legislative requirement to store data in Australia because of the nature of that data. So all of our stuff's stored in Australia. And the maintenance management and support is point 8 there. So if you've got your own internal IT department, we can just provide the facility and they can continue supporting you if that's the way you want to do it. If you don't have an IT department, which is most organisations obviously, then we can bundle in their maintenance management of support of everything that's technology related in your organisation. So it's basically just less things to worry about. Doesn't matter if it's got flashy lights, basically you can call us and we'll figure out what's wrong with it. And the other important part about that is to bring reporting back to you on a periodic basis. Because what a lot of not-for-profits don't do is they don't continually realign their technology with their business goals. So they make some decisions on technology, and then over time, the way that technology serves them just drifts off track, or rather the goals of the organisation may change slightly. So you've got this constant divergence between technology result and business goals. So the way to fix that is to, whatever the time period is, once a month, once a quarter, come together, discuss the way IT is working, discuss the new goals that you've got in your organisation, or the changes that are happening around the way you're receiving your funding, all those sorts of things, to try and continue to make sure that IT is serving the organisation as best it can. Point number 9 on the bottom of that chart is quite interesting. This looks like the latest, greatest way to do your IT, and it is, but it's actually the most efficient, cost-efficient way to do it. We've got a white paper that goes into some detail on this, so let me know if you'd like to see that. But between 20 and 30% cheaper to do it this way than to do it any other way, including public cloud or including running servers in your own office. And it's also highly scalable. There's no more projects replacing servers and all that sort of stuff. That just doesn't happen anymore. You just turn up the dial, or rather we turn up the dial for you, as much server horsepower as what you want. Add 10 more staff pretty much overnight. No projects required. Add 100 staff overnight. So basically those inexpensive technologies we can apply to any sized organisation really, and that make them logistically ready to take advantage of an offshore team. The net financial result, here's an example from a recent client, the one with 15 staff that I was telling you about before. This is someone that we're working with at the moment. They've got 15 staff, one location in Brisbane, and they're about $2.5 million turnover. They're looking to hire 5 more staff over the next 6 months. That's the point at which we came and started talking to them. And we did a strategic analysis of their IT and their potential for offshoring, because as you've seen, that the concepts kind of merge, and it's important to get both of them right. So we did an analysis of both of those aspects of the business, and we helped them map out a strategy for a private cloud implementation and establishing a team in Manila. And that little snip down there, it's an actual copy and paste of part of their report. And it shows there that the net benefit to them was around $690,000 over the 3 years that we looked at it, and that's after they shifted to the new private cloud model and after basically they paid us for consulting fees. So that's a big difference to a relatively small organisation. There's a 10% gain to them, 10% addition to their bottom line in terms of their turnover, and that's really with almost no changes to their business process. And that's without losing any local staff. They just added some overseas. If they really wanted to, they could have probably pushed that to the point where they were shifting 5 of their local positions as well. I don't think that would have been hard at all. And then they would have gained, by my estimates, around about a 25% reduction in their overall operating costs. So, if that was your organisation, you've immediately got $230,000 to $500,000 per year to sink straight into your services delivery and to reach more people with the work that you do. It's a pretty compelling argument. Most businesses that I've seen so far can run with a 1/3 offshore component, so looking at all of their administrative roles, not looking at the people that you've got in the field. Obviously you can't offshore that, but looking at the administrative core of your organisation and anything that doesn't require on-site services delivery. Most businesses that I've seen, they can run with a 1/3 offshore component without making any major changes at all to their business processes. It's really just hiring people, skilled people in another country to do the same work you'd be doing here. With a serious commitment to efficiency, I've seen a lot of businesses push that to 50 or 60% offshore, but it really depends on the type of business. Now, you might have heard a recent news article which was pretty funny, but quite a revealing argument about this change of business model and how it's going to affect every sized organisation. This was just do a search on Bob, the software developer, and you'll find lots of news articles on this. You might have already seen it. So this recent news article gave us a very good insight into the way the world's changing and also how some people are ahead of the trends and some people are way behind. So Bob, the software developer, worked for a US company, and he was discovered by a third-party security company that eventually figured out what he was doing. But for over 9 months he'd been coming into work every day as normal, but what he'd been quietly doing is outsourcing his job to China. Didn't tell anyone in the organisation, but he was paying a Chinese software developer a fraction of his 6-figure salary to log on to his employer's network across the internet and do his work for him every day. Now, later analysis of his computer showed that Bob spent all day every day surfing the web, watching funny cat videos. Literally, they've actually logged his time frame and published it, and this is what he did. He watched a lot of funny cat videos, and he surfs websites like Reddit, Facebook, and eBay. So he did nothing all day. The real kicker to this was that for several quarters in a row, Bob had regularly been given accolades for being the best software developer in the building. He was always handing in very clean software code and always on time. Now, there's no better proof than this story that global sourcing is the required new business model. Now, that employer learned not only can Bob's job, and probably many other jobs in the organisation, be done for a fraction of the price that Bob can do them, they can also be done to a higher standard. If we're serious about results in our organisations, we simply cannot afford to overlook the impact of global sourcing. So I'm going to wrap this up by giving you what I see as being the picture of the future not-for-profit. And by future, I don't mean distant future. I mean this is happening now, and organisations are putting these things into place now. Just around the corner, you'll start to find organisations that look a little something like this. This future organisation has world-class cloud-based IT systems that are hosted in Australia and for compliance reasons, highly flexible, infinitely scalable, and extremely cost efficient. The IT department's probably outsourced to an Australian company who itself utilises an offshore team to minimise costs and improve services for clients. The organisation has multiple offices that connect together seamlessly for information sharing, and they utilise technologies like an ERP database, SharePoint, video calling, and VoIP telephony in order to keep their team feeling close together. Dashboards of organisational performance and successes are displayed electronically in all of their offices so that the team members can feel rewarded and motivated by the extent of their great works. One thing I've noticed is that as you set up offices in different places and particularly different countries, it's a new challenge to make sure that those team members are connected into not only your organisational goals and your vision, but they have a good understanding of what you're actually achieving on a day-to-day basis, because they're actually quite remote from the people on the ground. So being technologically efficient and effective makes the organisation more attractive to corporate sponsors. They enjoy a high-profile corporate support. The corporate support dollars that may have seemed impossible before for this organisation, they now find much easier to attract. They run an Australian team with multiple locations, but they also run a team in Manila. Why Manila? Well, it's much closer to us than India. There's plenty of staff available in all sorts of skill sets that you can imagine. The accents are much easier to understand, and they're on the same time zone as us. That's why the Philippines. Their Australian staff are highly experienced and a big part of creating the vision of the organisation. The organisation can afford to hire people that are the best at what they do. They're aligned with the organisation's values and they produce the best results. They can afford to pay well for great people in Australia and Manila, and therefore they get the continuity benefits of many years of their ongoing service. This organisational vision is strong and transcends national borders, creating one unified team, though in time it will employ in several countries. An Australian team member lives in Manila to run the team there and assist with unifying the organisation. I've seen a lot of businesses do that. They'll send someone over. Obviously you can't order someone to go live in another country, but it's not unusual for Australian people, once they see what it's like, to want to go and live there and work there. Additional offshore staff have been employed for marketing and brand management, leveraging the community building power of Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and websites to build a broader base of loyal supporters and private contributors. The supporters are kept constantly informed of the organisation's achievements, so they feel very connected and very inclined to continue and to increase support. This is as that organisation that I discussed earlier did. They started experimenting with their marketing and just pretty much throwing more people at the issue and being very creative about the way they did marketing. If you didn't have to worry so much about what a person cost to manage those things, I'm sure you'd have those sorts of things being done for your organisation as well. You can have one person dedicated to making sure that your public profile is being maintained and managed and advanced constantly. Their offshore team runs much of the back end of the organisation, dramatically lowering the cost of administration, finance, payroll, and even fleet management. There's a dedicated offshore team that compiles reports to perfection to satisfy compliance and funding requirements. And even when reporting needs a lot of manual work, more people can be assigned to complete it. But overall, the cost of reporting is kept very low. Here's an interesting point. A small portion of the big cost savings with the new business model was then rolled back into starting to offer client services in Manila. The Australian manager in Manila set up relationships with the Philippines government agencies who are keen to receive the great services of the organisation. Now, it's only a small portion of the savings brought about by global sourcing, but the first $50,000 that this organisation assigns to its international programs is expected to reach a long way. So you can think of this not only in terms of how to improve your Australian operations, but if you're going into another country anyway, you're going to have a presence there, how about expanding the reach of your organisation to deliver client services in those countries? And we're not talking about having to raise funds in those countries or anything like that. We're talking about spending a very small portion of your overall savings on starting to deliver services in those countries. And $50,000 in a place like the Philippines, if it's properly and carefully managed, can go a very long way. Very long way. So this future organisation with an international aspect, a strong vision, a broad base of dedicated supporters, the corporate and government support is further boosted. It creates new synergies and further leverages the effectiveness of the organisation. As soon as you're international and as soon as you're open to conducting your services in other countries, that really opens you up to a whole lot of other opportunities. With an impeccable compliance record, you get boasting incredibly low cost per deliverable, superb accountability, a risk-averse approach to information management, and a bright and active public branding. This organisation is the first choice for attracting funding from government sources, the first choice for ethical talent looking for a way to make a difference, and the first choice for clients who need help. Ladies and gentlemen, this can be the future of your organisation, and I know it will soon be the future of other organisations. This is where we're all heading, regardless of whether we think it's a good idea. Australia is now just one small part of a global labour pool, and organisations need to adapt their methods to maximise the benefits for their clients and their stakeholders. The good news amongst all this is that those who lead the way will find substantial benefits over the coming years. Thank you. Open to taking questions, and I've left on the screen there some resources and my contact information as well.
Thank you, Scott. We don't actually have any questions in the question box. I'm just not sure whether, obviously, what you've delivered is just very clear, or something new for everyone that is a bit overwhelmed with the with the information.
Where do we start? Yeah.
Well, we do have some comments that they thought it was a fantastic presentation. I've got Bronia raising their hand. If you probably want to type your question in the question box, if you do have a question. And Pamela, yeah. So Pamela and Bronia, maybe if you can type your questions in the question box, then we can answer them for you. Other than that, I will just remind you that we are recording this session, and as Scott mentioned, he will make the slides available, and I will email them to you after the webinar. So, okay, we have a few questions here. Melita, do you want to just read them out?
Yeah, sure. So we've got one here. We are just starting off in our journey as a brand new not-for-profit, and what suggestions do you have for us?
Okay. Well, my first suggestion would be to look carefully at these, I guess, the new opportunities that are opening up in the way that businesses are being structured now. Because you're a new organisation, you don't have a big legacy, to overcome. You don't have to change your business model, and you don't have to convince a lot of people that there's potentially more cost-effective and more efficient ways to do things, because you don't have that sort of legacy to overcome. So there's, depending on, I'm not sure of the scale of your organisation at the moment, but assuming that it's small, there's lots of ways to start these concepts on a very small level as well. But I'd be thinking right from the early days to start considering what kind of roles you want to have in Australia and what kind of roles don't need to be here. You really want to be having the high skill roles and the client-facing type work here, and consider where else you can have the other roles. Happy to go into details with you personally and have a bit more of a chat about your organisation.
We've also got a few more questions here. So what would be the first step to take in implementing this new idea and new way of not-for-profits operating?
Yeah, good question. The first step is really to look at the scope. So need to have an idea of what kind of roles need to be done here, or what kind of roles really present the best value for your clients and for your operation by keeping them in Australia. Because you don't want to create change for the sake of change. You only want to implement things that are really going to make a difference. So the first thing to do is really start to analyze the roles in your organization. If you start to think about it in terms of tasks rather than positions, because what I've seen a lot of is, because in Australia we've, for the last 20 years, been doing more with less all the time. You know, there used to be, everyone had a dedicated secretary at one stage, and then cost imperatives meant that that doesn't happen anymore. So what's tended to happen is that we have a whole range of generalists in our organization. We have people who are fantastic at doing certain things, they're really skilled and really passionate about it, and then they're lumbered with all of these additional administrative tasks which are low skill, not what they want to do, and we're giving them too expensive people to do it. So you can start to break apart roles. You know, just take any of the roles in your organization and list all of the tasks that they start to do. And when you start to think of a role in terms of its tasks, you can see immediately that a whole bunch of it doesn't need to be done here. And I guarantee you, if you go to those people and say, how would you like it if we took away all of these boring parts of your job and give them to someone else, they're not going to resist that. They're going to be pretty happy with the result. And what you can do is take those tasks and give them to someone that's great at those tasks. You know, set up your offshore team so that you've got specialists doing those tasks as well, but the people that are here are doing the things that are really high value and make sense to give to expensive people to do. So that task analysis is a great place to start. And you also really need to, as I've said, have a look at your technology. There's no point. I've seen organizations start the process of offshoring too early without the right technology, and it just makes it too hard. And you know, implementing something like a private cloud, or maybe you don't even need that to that extent, but thinking ahead of time about how the technology aspect's going to work can make the implementation of an offshore strategy much smoother. So you know, that's really the first step. Whenever we start working with the client, we do two things. You know, the IT organization goes through and does an audit of the way their IT is currently structured and has a look at what things are going to work and what things aren't from an offshoring perspective. So the telephony, for example, have a look and see if your phone system has that capability. If it does, great. Just do a bit of a costing on what it's going to take to turn those features on. If you need to share applications with a team overseas, we need to have a look and see how that's going to work. So you do an analysis of the IT side, and you do an analysis of the scope of your roles and tasks within your organization. So Easy Offshore typically does that. We go through and have a look at the number of roles, the nature of those roles, the types of tasks that could be best offshored, and also a look at how the organization is planning to evolve and change over time. You know, whether it's a strategy that we want to maximize the impact of having an offshore team now, or whether it's something where we want to phase this in potentially over time, and the only thing we're doing is adding new positions offshore. You know, if some organizations, and Easy Offshore has a specialist division to it that deals with insolvencies or near insolvencies as well. So we have organizations that come to us that are financially stuffed, and they're very close to going into administration. And in the equivalent often for not-for-profits is they've just had funding withdrawn, or they're not being renewed funding from a range of sources, and that's causing extreme financial pressures on the organisation. So there might be a need to go through a rapid transformation process, and we can look at, you know, within 3 months we need to have cut X number of dollars from our budget, or, you know, there's going to be consequences. So it really depends on the specific situation that you're in and how it works in with the culture of your organisation, as well as to how quickly you might adopt these things.
And now, as we're quite near the end, we've only got time for one more question, so this will be the final one. So, do you have tools to analyse an old organisation's potential scale of offshoring?
At the moment, I don't have a tool that I can send you to step you through that process. It's a little bit dynamic, and at this point we're doing it via a consulting process. So I can send, and I will send, a document to Christine and Melita that runs through the steps that we do. to give you an idea of the process. But at the moment I'm just finding every organisation's too different to come up with a universal map that we can just give out that people can follow. So that may come later, but this is a space that's changing fairly quickly. So at the moment we're seeing every business is a little bit unique, so that's why we're trying to do it in a personal way.
Great, thanks Melita and thanks Scott. As Melita mentioned, that was actually the last question, and thank you everyone for asking, those who asked questions and those who have been listening and participating at in the webinar. I will send through some materials after the webinar, including the link to the recording, so you can catch up or share it with your colleagues. But other than that, thanks very much Scott for the presentation. That was a great webinar, and